All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's Express webinar and to the series, Achieving Organizational Agility with Scrum at Scale. So as many of you probably know, this is a bi-weekly series of short webinars. They're designed to be 30 minutes or less and will feature Scrum at Scale experts who will be sharing their insights on how to apply the Scrum at Scale framework to really achieve organization-wide agility. My name is Jessica Larson. I'm the director of the Scrum at Scale Trainer Program. I'm really excited to be here today and hosting today's webinar. I'll be monitoring questions as we go. Now, each webinar in this series will be focusing on a unique topic regarding Scrum at Scale. And I'm really excited about today's topic. We're going to be talking about management's role in a Scrum at Scale implementation. So how does management fit into this? And as a registrant of this series, we will be keeping you up to date on future events and topics, but you can also find the full list of upcoming events on our website at scrumatscale.com and scrumatscale.com/events. Now, as you may be aware, Scrum at Scale is the natural extension of the core Scrum framework, and it enables networks of Scrum teams that are operating consistently with the Scrum Guide to readily adapt to changing business needs while creatively delivering business outcomes of the highest possible value. So it was created by the co-creator of Scrum, Dr. Jeff Sutherland, and it has been used to successfully transform the way of work in a number of industries and domains. So if you're interested in a really nice overview of the framework, or if you want to learn more about how it's being used and where it's being used, I recommend that you check out our recorded webinars and our growing library of case studies. Those are available on demand on our website at scrumatscale.com. And I also wanted to mention that some of our trainers are now offering free virtual coaching sessions. So if you're interested in participating in those, if you have questions or want advice on how you're implementing Scrum in your organizations, I recommend that you sign up for those. So there's the URL there, scrumatscale.com/virtual coaching sessions. So definitely check those out. Now, before introducing today's speaker, I just briefly like to cover a few housekeeping items. So first, in order to provide you with the best listening experience, all audio lines except the host and presenters will be muted. But if you do have a question for the presenter or about this presentation, we encourage you to ask them. Just use the Q&A panel at the bottom of your console, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. The chat feature will also be available, so if you'd like to share comments with the rest of the webinar attendees, or if you'd like to respond to some questions that we'll be asking you today, we invite you to use the chat panel, but just direct any questions through the Q&A panel. We also want to note that we're not going to be using the raised hand functionality. And I also want to mention that this webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand from the Scrum at Scale website and YouTube channel later this afternoon. And we'll be sending a link to everyone tomorrow with a link to the recording and the slides, so you can download those. I also want to mention that these webinars are eligible for SEU credit from the Scrum Alliance, but you'll need to view 2 webinars for each credit. With all of that said, I would like to now introduce our speaker, Jason Tanner. Jason is the CEO and co-founder of Applied Frameworks, which is a global management consulting firm. He has over 18 years of leadership experience and has worked in, across many domains, including product management, marketing, business planning, partner management, project management, and leadership, just to name a few. But over the past several years, Jason has really been focused on very large-scale Agile adoptions. So he's been coaching large organizations and the thousands of people that work for them to really overcome the various challenges that arise when the ways of working change. Jason has over 9 years of experience working as a Marine infantry officer, and that has influenced his attraction to agility. He's a certified Scrum trainer, a certified Contineo collaboration instructor, and a certified Scrum at Scale trainer. He was actually in the inaugural Scrum at Scale trainer cohort and has really helped to shape the Scrum at Scale trainer program and the framework itself into what it is today. So I really want to give a warm welcome to you, Jason, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Great, thanks, Jessica, and thank you to everyone taking time on a Friday to join the webinar. And I do want to get to know a little bit about who's here. So if you would, in your chat window, just enter your title. That'd be really useful to help me frame the conversation and the presentation around who's here. So see, Carrie's a Scrum Master, Agile Coach, flying by here, Business Analyst, Performance Manager, great, System Admin, Director, great. Lots of Scrum Masters, Program Manager, excellent. Very good. Another Program Manager, Black Belt, cool. And Lead Product Manager, Systems Analyst, fantastic. Very good. Some release managers, product owners. Great to see product owners. Thank you for joining. Product portfolio manager, near and dear to my heart. Manager of finance, wonderful. All right, lots of Agile coaches and Scrum Masters. That's great. So thanks for that. That's really helpful to know as I progress through this. So before I dive into the manager's role, I thought it'd be good to just take a moment and look at the framework itself. And the idea here is I just want to give a quick overview to set up the context for what I'm going to be talking about. So when I explain the Scrum Scale Framework, I start with the two cycles, the Scrum Master cycle and the Product Owner cycle, which enables multiple teams to coordinate to deliver products in complex environments that require lots of adaptation. As a Scrum trainer, as an advocate for Scrum, I tend to always talk about the transparency, inspection, adaptation, and that's really what this framework lends itself to at scale in a very pragmatic manner, which is also adaptive as well to the shape of the organization and number of teams. On the left side, the Scrum Master cycle includes the efficient, effective team level processes. So I tend to start right in the middle here with the team level processes, which really looks at the structures of the teams and just good execution of good Scrum, which we can find in the Scrum Guide at the team level. Then we move over to continuous improvement and impediment removal. That's where multiple teams coordinate the removal of organizational impediments. So while Scrum Masters at the team level do that as well, we're looking for patterns of issues across multiple teams, which can be removed, and for multi-team improvement. And I'll be coming back to this one for sure as I talk about the manager's role. Cross-team coordination, we almost think about that as what we've traditionally talked about, the Scrum of Scrums, where the technical coordination and the team-to-team coordination can occur, which ensures we have high-quality integrated development of great products by multiple teams to enable successful deployment, which is the next step. And where we'll get into that is really part of the manager's role as well. And this cycle ends with product and release feedback. So how teams can get access to post-release feedback about the product to then adapt and develop in the next cycle. I want to note that the Scrum Master cycle also includes the executive action team, which exists to provide assistance with removal of the biggest obstacles to organizational effectiveness, as well as providing the guidelines and vision for the Agile adoption, which I'll also come back to as I talk about the manager's role. On the product owner cycle, also starting with the team level process and then moving into the strategic vision. And this can be both for organizational strategic vision and for product vision. And this is also where large organizations are able to connect the corporate strategy to the portfolio of products and services to accomplish the strategy, which then filters down to individual product team strategy. So this is really a key component which becomes more and more critical depending on the size of the organization. Smaller, flat organizations with 5 to 6 teams, the vision may be very evident, very clear across the organization, and maybe just one platform supporting the vision. When we scale up to large banks and financial institutions, we may have multiple business units, each with their own vision and their own portfolios tying into products. So I'll definitely be coming back to vision when I talk about the manager's role. Backlog prioritization is really all about how do multiple teams cross-prioritize and ensure consistent alignment between product owners. And this includes the executive meta scrum, which is an interesting structure which really complements the cross-team coordination executive action team to identify what are organizational priorities and how can that filter into the backlogs at multiple levels of product ownership and product leadership. Backlog decomposition and refinement, quite similar to team level. However, now we're doing it at scale. So what is the sequence of the decomposition of the features and the backlog items, and how can we ensure that teams have a consistent inventory of work to be done and that the teams aren't starved for more work? Then we get into release planning, which enables the product owners to begin forecasting based on empirical evidence of past performance and look ahead and actually prepare to launch products. And a lot of the frameworks miss that opportunity to plan out successful product launch. How are we going to go to market? What sales channels are we going to use? How are we going to ensure we're delivering the right product to the right market at the right time? And likewise, we're ending at the product and release feedback, which is absolutely a domain of product owners to really gather that market research needed to go into the next cycle. So before moving on, I want to go back again to the chat window and with a simple question: which component that you see right now on the screen is the most challenging to you? So go ahead and type which component is most challenging to you into the chat window. Vision. Okay, some cross-team coordination. Prioritization. Yes. Vision, yeah, tends to be very popular here, which is good because it aligns to what I'm going to talk about. It's great. Meta Scrum, release planning, all of it. Yes. Well, glad you're here if all of it's challenging. Great, some release planning. Excellent. Good, thank you so much for sharing that. Understanding what our product is. Yes, Chris, some companies do have that struggle. Okay, good. So the way I've framed the rest of this is that we'll be looking at the manager's role, and I really want to talk about 4 things about the manager's role. So I'm going to highlight and make a list here of the manager's role by highlighting different areas of the framework. And I do want to start with vision because as some of you identified in the chat, this is often a common issue. So the first role for the manager is to ensure clarity of goals. And the first goal is obviously the business goal. What is the business that we're in, and what's the goal for our team, our product, as we're moving forward? Now, while you would typically think about this as a product owner responsibility, it can also be a key aspect of the manager's role to ensure that the people that are working with the manager understand the goal as well as they do from the product owner. It should be the same message. Likewise, what is the goal for Agile? Why are we adopting Agile? Why Scrum? And why are we doing this at scale? And to dive deeper in this concept, I'm going to talk about shared consciousness, which is a term that I picked up from General McChrystal and his book, Team of Teams. It's really fascinating to look at the parallels between his experiences linking a global organization of warfighters in a very complex adaptive environment that requires some opportunities for people to actually get on the same page. And that's really the way I think about shared consciousness is, are we on the same page? And I look at the key role that I start when I'm talking to managers is creating and supporting this state of collective intelligence, where as things are changing, as the situation is emerging, the manager is continuously communicating what's happening and ensuring that the communication is happening at the team levels. So this emergence of shared consciousness can be supported by and amplified by the manager. And you know, it's interesting when I told Jessica, I wanted to put that Marine Corps image on there because it was fascinating to me as a young adult, and I need to update my bio because I'm hiding my age by saying I only have 19 years of experience. It was interesting to me as a young officer when I had the chance to spend some time with generals over 3 or 4 weeks when we were doing some work in California. They were saying the same thing over and over again. And it puzzled me because the first thing that came to mind is like, wow, it takes a lot of stamina and patience to keep repeating yourself. And as I thought more and more about it, I came to a realization that there's a reason for that. First of all, the fact that I heard the message multiple times meant it was really embedded for me. But what also struck me in reflection is that by repeating the same thing over and over again with each of the groups that the general was meeting with, meant that the whole organization was hearing the same message and hearing it consistently and hearing it from the leader. And that's what managers can do. So the first role here, again, I think is for the manager to ensure that there's a constant communication and vision for Agile and for the business. And for a lot more on that, I highly recommend Team of Teams. Very well written, very quick read because it's so fascinating. And you can also skip ahead and just watch the TED Talk. And that's why I put the link in here in the presentation, because it is very good at sharing some of the key concepts that also come out in the book. Next, cross-team coordination. And I'm going to talk about that maybe in a way that might be surprising. So developing cross-functional self-organizing team structures with loose coupling. So what I mean by this is that there's a huge impact of cross-functional self-organizing teams. I'm just going to pause a minute so you can read this. So for many of you as Scrum Masters and program managers and coaches, that may not be surprising that the performance is so much higher. But one of the key roles for the manager is to evaluate and consider how cross-functional are the teams. What actions can I take in thinking about how these teams are structured to change the structures to ensure that they're cross-functional? Can every team complete a high-quality product increment every sprint? And the manager's got the capability and the leadership ability to then make those changes and find out what the gaps are and help fill those gaps, whether through reallocation of skills and people with those skills or through hiring appropriately. So it's definitely a key manager role that follows after vision. Next would be to ensure that the teams are loosely coupled. And that's where we get into decisions about the dependencies. Like, how can we rethink how our past perceptions of dependencies between teams and teams can be changed so we can reduce the handoffs. So managers, when thinking about team structures, need to think about reducing the delays that impact delivery. And that can be done by decreasing the number of handoffs. How can that be done? By ensuring each team is independent and cross-functional, then working with the product owners to ensure that the backlogs are also independent and not relying upon multiple teams working together simultaneously and handing work back and forth. Multiple teams working simultaneously to deliver simultaneously great with the minimum degree of handoffs. And that is definitely a management action to ensure the team structures are correct to support that objective. So next, loosely coupled architectures equals loosely coupled teams. So tied into that is that the managers have an opportunity to examine the technical structure. So Conway's Law, you may have heard of it, this notion that the system architecture reflects the structure of the organization. That's the bottom line. And it tends to be true in most organizations. When you look at the system structure, you do see team structures that mirror that. So modular architecture is going to support our goal of modular independent teams. So there is an ancillary concept that as we're thinking about team structures, we need to ensure that we're decoupling the architecture, which can be a multi-year journey in itself, and something that managers can help support and stimulate through examination of how coupled is the architecture. If one team makes a change in one area of the code, does that cause a simultaneous impact in another area? And how can we break that dependency and decrease that impact? So we actually have teams that can function independently, maybe even release independently without impacting the overall system. So it's a big opportunity for managers to become engaged. Next, continuous impediment improvement and impediment removal. This is a key one, and I've got really important ideas here, at least I think they're important, about increasing the system efficiency. So fix the system, not the people. This, to me, is really important, something I reflect on as a leader of an organization of the people are fine. What changes do I need to make to our processes and our systems to ensure our people who are already talented, already capable, can do their jobs effectively, efficiently, and be happy doing it. So that's the goal. So the first thing, and hey, Scrum Masters, this is for you, managers need to talk to the Scrum Masters because the Scrum Masters know all the little dirty bottlenecks that need to be removed. And the bottlenecks can be challenging because I think that as organizations are progressing on their Agile journey, after 6 or 12 months, some teams hit a ceiling. There's no more team level impediments left for the Scrum Master to remove. The ceiling is the big organizational impediments are blocking the next level of agility. And that's where the managers can get involved because the Scrum Masters know exactly what they are and should be working together to prioritize those bottlenecks because, you know, this is one of my favorite paradigms. Listen for these words. I would tell the manager, listen for the words, we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to move code from testing into pre-production. We're not allowed to do that. That's a process, policy, or simply a perception just waiting to be changed by the managers. So my bio slide listed Pat the CSP educator, which means that I'm one of the educators that provides advanced level training for Scrum Masters and product owners. And our course has an interesting challenge built in for an assignment for Scrum Masters to go work on a significant organizational challenge, which typically involves working with a manager, at least one manager, and usually more than one. And we're getting back these fantastic stories about how hard these challenges are to solve and how they hit resistance and how they overcome resistance. And one role of managers within Scrum at Scale is going to be to decrease the resistance to the impediment removal. And that's going to be key, really, with one team or multiple teams. It's really unlocking the value of the Agile adoption, the value of execution with Scrum at Scale, simply by removing the big impediments to the speed you may be trying to achieve, the higher quality you're trying to achieve. Managers fit right in here, working with the Scrum Masters to prioritize those impediments. Finally, deployment. When I talk about deployment, it's establishing standards and the environment for engineering excellence. And yep, it could get kind of technical here because what I'm talking about, and this, by the way, this is not my expertise, but I do know the levers to pull. First is establishing the standards for code and test to minimize the technical debt. That could be as simple as what syntax are we using, what are the code comments, what's our expectations and standards for unit testing, how much of the code coverage are we going to have for test automation, and so on. So first thing is setting the standard, identifying the standard, ensuring the teams are adhering to the standard. Second, automate the repetitive manual activities. I'm continuing to be surprised by how many organizations still invest hundreds and hundreds of hours in manual regression testing, which could be automated. And that's an opportunity for managers to support and invest in automation, both the investment in the software, the frameworks, the structures, maybe even the hardware, but also in the training and the time it takes to automate, which will obviously be a trade-off with product owners. There's a valuable trade-off that can be explained to product owners, how much efficiency they're going to gain from that automation to enable the developers to do the innovative work they need to do instead of the repetitive, boring work that they're doing. May also need to consider provisioning of continuous integration followed by continuous delivery. And that's a management initiative as well, because it probably will require an investment, both in resources, software and hardware, and in time for people to complete that. So in summary, the high level pitch I have for managers is to explain why Agile and your organizations and products why. Again, communicating the vision, not just once, but over and over again until you know that the people are speaking about the vision in the same language. Next, review the team composition, adjust until each team is cross-functional and completely self-organizing and independent. Next, assist the Scrum Masters remove those high-impact impediments, the big challenge. Develop the modular architecture. Again, with test automation, big fan of test automation, and any one of these actions will result in high impact as a manager. So my reassurance here is we don't need to do them all at once. And this is definitely a step-by-step journey. One small change can have a huge impact. Once that change is made, you can move on to the next one to have an even more impact. That's really the summary I've got. Really enjoyed putting this together because it made me think about a lot of important things. So Jessica, I'll take a breath and ask you, what questions are there for me to possibly answer right now?
Absolutely, yes. And thank you so much, Jason, for this information on how management fits in. We have a question here around how to define the organizational design of several teams with Scrum at Scale. Should we be looking at value streams or something different?
Yes, so the most powerful metaphor of Scrum at Scale structure is a fractal organization. And when we were together in that picture there from the Scrum Inc. headquarters, Avi, who's holding the sign with Dr. Sutherland, he pulled over a plant. This big plant. So we've got this tree growing, and it's got different leaves on different branches. And notice this branch has 3 offshoots, and this one has 2. There's a much more organic explanation, and finally clicked for me. I get it now. Scrum at Scale structure can be adaptive to the organization. So my opinion of Scrum at Scale structure is that you follow the product. So however you define the product, which someone actually identified as one of their challenges with the model. So I can go with the simple example of we provide online home loan provisioning in one business unit, and we do that via the web, and we do that via mobile. Those could be 2 branches, 2 sets of teams working together to create that home loan acquisition experience. To me, that identifies the team structure. And effectively, that's one structure that I'm familiar with because I work with an organization to do that. Likewise, when we look at product-facing companies or product-based companies, the team structures I think are around the product lines within the portfolio. Another way to consider that is how do you think about the portfolio of investments, and talk about the investment currency being teams. So if the portfolio is a portfolio of projects, well, I can assemble the teams and keep them together and send them any projects I want, and maintain the cohesion of the teams. One mistake a lot of organizations traditionally made is we put teams together, do a project, and we disband the teams and form new teams for new projects. Instead, we can still have a project-based funding mentality and execution mentality, and then filter the project work to various teams and move teams around instead of individuals.
Great. I think we have time for just one more here. So managers often contribute to strategy, but how do they plug into the Scrum at Scale structure if they're not product owners or part of the executive teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll go back up and give you my 2 cents here. When I get to the picture, there we go. So number 1, I'm thinking about the feedback, deployment, monitoring deployment, working with teams, supporting deployment. Built in as well is going to be involvement, engagement, and release planning. So I think about a Scrum at Scale release planning with multiple teams. I would think managers would be welcomed because we may identify impediments right there that need to be acted on. Definitely see a connection between the executive action team because they're going to identify impediments, and they're going to be able to draw upon management assistance to get to remove those impediments. So both from a Scrum Master check-in, hey, what do you need from me to improve? What impediment do you need from me to remove to be more efficient? So both in delivery and in impediment removal, to me, are the most effective ways when you think about this model to be engaged.
Thank you. We have actually now reached the end of our time box for today's event, but if you'd like to learn more about Scrum at Scale, the best way to do so is to take a certified Scrum at Scale practitioner class. They are available across the globe, and you can go to our website to find a class near you, scrumatscale.com. While you're there, check out the case study library, check out the previous webinars, and the free coaching sessions. With that, I'd really like to thank you, Jason, once again, for taking the time to share your insights with us today and help us better understand, how the manager's role fits into Scrum at Scale. So thank you so much. And I want to thank all of our participants today. If you would, as you're leaving, if you wouldn't mind just dropping in the chat, how you felt about today's session on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. How did you like it? If you have any feedback for us on how we can improve this series, go ahead and drop it in the chat or email it to support@scrumatscale.com. And thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.